I never imagined that a single choice could unravel the fabric of my life so completely. It wasn't a sudden decision, but rather a series of moments that led me down a path I never intended to tread. The day Ethan walked into our home, all youthful energy and earnest smiles, I felt a shift, a ripple beneath the calm surface of my existence. As my son's friend, he was supposed to be just another familiar face. Yet, somewhere between casual greetings and lingering conversations, lines began to blur, and boundaries started to fade. My name is Melina Gattens, a 42-year-old woman living in the quiet suburbs of Crawley Creek. For the past 22 years, I've been married to Johnson, a man as dependable as the sunrise. We have one son, Harris, who recently turned 20 and is in his second year of college. Our life together has been, by all accounts, stable and ordinary, a comfortable home, weekly family dinners, and annual vacations to familiar places. Our house is a modest two-story with a garden I tend to religiously. It's my sanctuary, a place where I can lose myself among the roses and forget, if only momentarily, the restlessness that has begun to stir within me. Johnson works long hours at his engineering firm, and Harris is often away at school or occupied with friends. This leaves me with ample time to manage the household and volunteer at the local community center. Trevor Parker entered our lives through Harris during their freshman year. Tall and athletic, with a carefree demeanor and a contagious enthusiasm for life, he was a frequent visitor to our home. His sandy brown hair and green eyes carried a hint of mischief, and his laughter often echoed through the hallways, bringing an unexpected vitality to the otherwise quiet house. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, while Harris was out running errands, Trevor stopped by to drop off a textbook. I invited him in, offering a glass of iced tea to counter the summer heat. We sat on the patio, shaded by the wisteria, and our conversation flowed effortlessly, from his aspirations in sports medicine to my passion for literature and art. I was surprised by his maturity and insight, qualities not often found in someone his age. As weeks passed, these brief interactions became more frequent. Trevor would arrive early before group study sessions or linger after Harris left for his part-time job. I found myself looking forward to these moments, drawn to the ease with which we connected. There was a spark, subtle yet undeniable, that I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as I was organizing books in the living room, Trevor appeared at the doorway. "Harris is running late," he said, his gaze meeting mine. "Mind if I wait here?" "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the sofa. "Make yourself comfortable." We talked for over an hour, delving deeper into personal topics, his struggles with family expectations, my feelings of stagnation. When he mentioned feeling lost, I saw a reflection of my own internal disquiet. A silence settled between us, heavy with unspoken understanding. His hand brushed mine as he reached for his glass, and a current passed between us that left me both exhilarated and unnerved. Reflecting on my marriage, I realized that routine had become the cornerstone of my relationship with Johnson. We were partners in managing life's responsibilities but had lost the intimacy and spontaneity that once defined us. Our conversations revolved around practicalities, bills, repairs, schedules. Attempts to reignite the spark were met with indifference or fatigue. I felt invisible, my desires and dreams overshadowed by the day-to-day monotony. Harris's departure for college intensified my sense of emptiness. I devoted so much of myself to being a mother that, in his absence, I struggled to find purpose. The community center filled my time but not the void within. I yearned for connection, for someone to see me beyond the roles of wife and mother. Trevor, with his youthful optimism and genuine interest, ignited something dormant inside me. He listened attentively, valued my opinions, and made me feel vibrant again. I knew it was inappropriate. He was my son's friend, after all, but emotions aren't always bound by logic. I justified our growing closeness as harmless, convincing myself that I was simply mentoring a young man in need of guidance. The boundaries continued to blur. Trevor began confiding in me about personal matters, his doubts about his major, conflicts with his parents, and his uncertainty about the future. In turn, I shared more of myself than I had with anyone in years. Our rapport felt natural yet charged with an undercurrent of tension. One afternoon, after helping him navigate a particularly difficult conversation with his father, he surprised me with a bouquet of daisies. "For your kindness," he said softly. "They're lovely," I replied, touched by the gesture. "But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he insisted, his gaze lingering. As I placed the flowers in a vase, our hands touched, and neither of us pulled away immediately. The air grew thick with an unspoken question. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. This was crossing a line, but the pull was strong. "We should be careful," I whispered, finally stepping back. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible. "But I can't ignore how I feel." Days turned into weeks, each encounter intensifying the internal battle. I began to notice the small signs of my deception: flushed cheeks when Trevor was mentioned, a quickening heartbeat at the sound of his car pulling into the driveway. Guilt gnawed at me, but it was overshadowed by a resurgence of emotions I'd long suppressed. Johnson remained oblivious, absorbed in his work. Our interactions were cordial but distant, the silence between us growing more pronounced. I considered addressing our disconnect but feared it was too late. The chasm seemed insurmountable. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner, I retreated to the back porch to find Trevor leaning against the railing, illuminated by the golden glow of sunset. "Couldn't stay away?" I joked, attempting to mask my unease. "I needed to see you," he confessed. "Being around you feels right." "Trevor, we can't do this," I said, my voice wavering. "Think about Harris, about what this could do to everyone involved." "I have," he replied, stepping closer. "But my feelings for you are real." Before I could respond, he gently held my hand. The tenderness in his touch eroded my remaining resolve. I knew the consequences, but, in that moment, the longing eclipsed all else. Our affair began discreetly, stolen moments and hidden exchanges. I was acutely aware of the risks but intoxicated by the revival of passion in my life. Trevor was attentive and caring, awakening a part of me that I'd thought was lost forever. However, secrecy breeds paranoia. Every glance from Harris felt scrutinizing. I became meticulous, ensuring there were no traces of our indiscretions. Yet, despite my efforts, the inevitable occurred. One Saturday afternoon, while Johnson was at work and Harris was visiting his grandparents, Trevor and I met at a cafe on the outskirts of town. We sat in a corner booth, engrossed in conversation, unaware that we were being observed. Later that evening, Harris confronted me. "I saw you today," he said, anger and confusion contorting his features. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "At the cafe, with Trevor. You were holding hands." "What's going on?" Panic surged through me. "It's not what you think," I lied weakly. "Don't insult me, Mom," he snapped. "I saw everything." I searched for words, but none came. The hurt in his eyes was unbearable. "How could you?" he demanded. "He's my friend, and you're married to Dad. Do you have any idea what this could do to our family?" "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears welling up. "I never meant for this to happen." "That's not good enough," he retorted. "You need to tell Dad before I do." The next few hours were a blur. I sat in the living room, racked with guilt and fear, awaiting Johnson's return. When he walked through the door, weary from the day, I knew there was no turning back. "Johnson, we need to talk," I began, my voice trembling. He looked at me with concern. "What's wrong?" "I've done something unforgivable," I confessed, tears streaming down my face. He sat down slowly, apprehension growing. "Tell me." Taking a deep breath, I revealed the affair. Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into the trust we'd built over decades. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally, to profound hurt. "With Trevor?" he asked incredulously. "Harris's friend?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. He stood abruptly, anger radiating from him. How could you betray us like this? Our marriage, our family, everything we've built. I don't have an excuse, I admitted. I felt disconnected, invisible. But that's no justification for what I've done. You're right, he said coldly. There's no justification. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, he spoke. I think it's best if you leave for a while. Johnson, please. Please what? He interrupted. Pretend this never happened? I can't even look at you right now. I moved into a small apartment near the community center, the loneliness of my new reality settling in quickly. Harris refused to speak to me, his pain manifesting as silence. Johnson filed for separation, the legalities proceeding with a sterile efficiency that contrasted sharply with the emotional chaos. Trevor attempted to reach out, but I couldn't face him. Our choices had caused immeasurable damage, and I needed to confront the consequences alone. Nights were the hardest, filled with relentless self-examination and regret. I replayed moments in my mind, wondering how I could have acted differently. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, whispers following me wherever I went. The community center relieved me of my volunteer duties, citing a need to preserve their reputation. I was adrift, stripped of the roles that had defined me. Resolution or twist ending. Months later, a letter arrived in the mail from Harris. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom. I've spent a lot of time trying to process everything. Part of me is still angry, but another part misses you. Dad won't talk about it, and I feel caught in the middle. I need you to know that, despite everything, I still love you. I'm not ready to see you yet, but maybe someday we can start to rebuild. Take care of yourself. Harris. Tears blurred the words as I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step toward healing. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could strive to become someone worthy of trust again. I began attending therapy, confronting the undercurrents that had led to my actions. Slowly, I started volunteering at a shelter, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own struggles. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was one I was determined to walk with integrity. Through this painful journey, I've learned that fulfillment cannot be sought through actions that undermine our own values and hurt those we love. Communication is essential. Had I voiced my feelings openly, perhaps the fractures in my relationships could have been repaired before they shattered. Betrayal leaves deep scars, not just on others but on oneself. Healing requires accountability, empathy, and time. While I cannot erase the harm I've caused, I can work toward understanding and, hopefully, forgiveness. Life is a series of choices, and each one shapes who we become. I've faced the consequences of mine and, in doing so, have found a chance to rediscover myself, not as a wife or mother defined by others, but as an individual capable of growth and change. I hope that one day, those I've hurt can see the person I'm striving to be and find it in their hearts to let me be part of their lives again.